The morning sun, filtered through the meticulously pruned oak trees of the Willow Creek estates, cast long, dappled shadows across Elara Vance's perfectly manicured lawn, a scene that screamed suburban idyll, a tranquil tableau that she had painstakingly chosen for its perceived peace and accessibility. Beside her, on the cool tiles of the kitchen floor, lay Max, a majestic golden retriever whose fur shone like spun gold in the morning light, his gentle snores a rhythmic counterpoint to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Max wasn't just a pet. He was Elara's shadow, her protector, her anchor in a world that often presented subtle, unseen challenges. His presence was a comforting weight, a constant reassurance, his every gentle nudge and focused gaze a testament to the profound bond they shared, a bond forged not just of love, but of vital necessity. Elara, a woman whose keen intellect was often masked by a serene demeanor, sipped her coffee, watching Max, feeling a profound gratitude for his unwavering companionship. Her home, a charming craftsman-style bungalow, was nestled within the strict, almost meticulously organized boundaries of the Homeowners Association, or HOA, a body known for its ironclad rules and unyielding commitment to maintaining the community's pristine appearance and, ostensibly, its harmonious living. Elara, having reviewed every page of their thick bylaws before purchasing, had felt confident. She knew her rights, especially concerning service animals, and had seen nothing that remotely suggested an issue. She valued order? Yes, but not at the expense of human dignity or legal compliance. This morning, however, the tranquility was about to shatter, not with a bang, but with the crisp rustle of an official envelope. It arrived with the regular mail, a stark white envelope bearing the Willow Creek Estates HOA logo, its formal font a stark contrast to the junk mail surrounding it. Elara's brow furrowed slightly. Typically, HOA communications were about community events or minor maintenance reminders. This one felt different, heavier. She tore it open, her fingers tracing the neat, impersonal font. The opening lines were innocuous enough, a standard greeting, but then her eyes caught a bolded phrase, a sentence that seemed to rip through the quiet fabric of her morning. Notice of violation, prohibition of animals. Her hand trembled, sending a ripple through her coffee. Prohibition of animals. Her gaze darted to Max, who, sensing her shift in mood, lifted his head, his dark, intelligent eyes meeting hers with an unspoken question. The letter continued, coldly citing specific sections of the bylaws, detailing a supposed no pets policy, and instructing her to remedy the situation immediately or face escalating fines and potential legal action. Remedy the situation. They wanted her to get rid of Max. A wave of disbelief, sharp and chilling, washed over her. This wasn't just a violation. It was an absurdity, a direct assault on her life, her well-being, and her legal rights. She read it again, slowly, deliberately, each word a hammer blow. In accordance with Section 3.b.I of the Willow Creek Estates Master Covenants, pets of any kind are strictly prohibited within the community premises. Double quotes the sheer arrogance, the blatant disregard for federal and state disability laws, pulsed from every line of the letter. It wasn't just ignorance. It felt like a deliberate slight, an assumption that she, like so many others, would simply comply, intimidated by the official letterhead and veiled threats. For a moment, a fierce, primal anger flared within her, hot and undeniable. How dare they? How dare they infringe upon a right so fundamental, so deeply ingrained in the very fabric of fair housing laws? Max, sensing the shift in her internal state, nudged her hand with his wet nose, a soft whine escaping his throat. She reached down, her fingers burying themselves in his soft fur, drawing comfort from his steady presence. Her initial shock and outrage began to recede, replaced by a familiar calm, the kind of stillness that precedes a strategic storm. It was the quiet calm of a seasoned attorney, one who had spent years fighting for the very rights the HOA so blithely ignored. The irony was palpable. almost laughably so. They had sent a boilerplate warning, utterly unaware that the recipient wasn't just a resident, but a formidable legal mind, an expert in the very field they were so spectacularly misinterpreting. The fire in her eyes wasn't one of panic, but of cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about Elara and Max anymore. It was about every individual with a disability, about the systemic ignorance and prejudice that still permeated society. Even in seemingly progressive communities, the fight wouldn't be easy, but she had fought tougher battles in much grander courtrooms. This small-town HOA was about to learn a very hard lesson, one meticulously drawn from the very legal text she had helped to shape. She reread the letter one last time, a faint, determined smile playing on her lips. They had made their move. Now, it was her turn. The initial shock had solidified into a cold, calculated anger within Elara, a fire fueled not by impulse, but by principle. Max, sensing the shift in her demeanor from the initial upset to a focused intensity, remained steadfastly by her side, a silent, furry anchor. The HOA's letter, now a crumpled, infuriating relic on her countertop, served as a constant reminder of the battle ahead. Elara wasn't one to back down, especially not when faced with such blatant disregard for established law and basic human decency. Her first move was not aggressive, but strategically polite. She drafted a concise, professional letter to the HOA board, referencing the Americans with Disabilities Act (ADA) and the Fair Housing Act (FHA), gently explaining Max's role as a service animal and requesting an accommodation form as legally required. She outlined the parameters of what a service animal entailed, careful not to overshare her personal details, but firm in the legal precedent. It was a clear, calm, and utterly legally sound communication, designed to prompt a standard, compliant response. She expected a bureaucratic, perhaps slightly apologetic, acknowledgement, followed by the requested forms. What she received a week later was anything but. The HOA's reply was delivered via certified mail, a thick envelope that felt ominously heavy in her hands. The tone of the letter was curt, dismissive, and dripping with an almost patronizing authority. Mrs. Davis, the board president, a woman, known more for her perfectly coiffed hair and unwavering belief in strict bylaws than for her empathy, had signed off on it. The letter reiterated their no pets policy, stating in no uncertain terms that exceptions are made lightly and that Elara's request does not appear to meet our community's strict criteria for animal residency. It went on to suggest that if her animal was truly essential, she should consider alternative housing arrangements more suitable for pets. There was no mention of the ADA, no acknowledgement of the FHA, and certainly no accommodation form. It was a cold, impenetrable wall of corporate jargon and willful ignorance. It appears, the letter concluded, that you may have misunderstood the nature of our community's guidelines. We advise you to review them thoroughly to avoid further complications. Elara read the letter twice, her jaw tightening with each dismissive sentence. The implication was clear. They thought she was trying to sneak a pet in, or that she was simply uneducated about their rules. They believed she was just another resident to be railroaded into compliance. A low growl rumbled deep in Max's chest, mirroring her rising indignation. They really don't get it, do they, boy? She murmured, stroking his head. They think they can just dismiss us. Her frustration was a sharp, bitter taste, but beneath it, a different emotion was simmering, the thrill of the intellectual chase, the familiar tightening of her legal mind preparing for battle. This wasn't just about her. It was about the precedent they were trying to set, the rights they were stomping on. And she wasn't about to let that happen. The dismissive reply was the catalyst. Elara's home office, usually a serene space filled with well-worn legal tomes and neatly stacked briefs, transformed into a war room. She pulled out her external hard drives, fired up specialized legal databases, and began a deep dive. Her computer screen glowed with legal precedents, court rulings, and scholarly articles on disability rights, fair housing, and HOA law. She cross-referenced Willow Creek's bylaws with state and federal statutes, identifying every loophole, every antiquated clause, every area where their policies clashed directly with established legal frameworks. She wasn't just looking for a way to win. She was building an airtight case, meticulously documenting every interaction, every dismiss letter, every piece of evidence of their noncompliance. Max lay patiently under her desk, occasionally nudging her foot, his presence a constant reminder of why she was fighting. Elara meticulously crafted her next communication. This wouldn't be a request. It would be an assertion of rights, laden with legal terminology that would make any non-attorney's head spin. She included specific citations to Federal Regulations 24 CFR Part 100.204 for the FHA, and relevant sections of the ADA, outlining the specific requirements for reasonable accommodation for service animals. She highlighted their legal obligation to engage in an interactive process and provide the required forms. She wasn't just referencing the laws, she was explaining them, subtly educating them through the sheer density and accuracy of her prose. She attached printouts of key court decisions from similar cases, highlighting the substantial penalties HOAs had faced for discrimination. Her tone remained polite, professional, but the underlying message was undeniable. She knew her stuff, and she was serious. There was a subtle gleam in her eye as she clicked send on the email, followed by dispatching a physical copy via certified mail. The loop was tightening. The HOA thought they were dealing with a naive resident, unaware that each dismissive letter they sent was just adding ammunition to her arsenal, each denial building a stronger case against them. She could almost picture Mrs. Davis's bewildered expression when she finally read through the dense legal jargon, the dawning realization that this was far from a simple no pets violation. The quiet storm was brewing, and the HOA was still, blissfully unaware of the tempest heading their way. The silence from the HOA after Elara's meticulously detailed, legally dense letter was, ironically, louder than any shouting match could have been. It lasted for precisely 8 days, a stretch during which Elara maintained her quiet routine, allowing Max his usual joyful rambles through their backyard, all while her mind, sharp as a freshly honed blade, analyzed every potential counter-move. She knew their silence wasn't surrender. It was either confusion, delay tactics, or, most likely, an attempt to regroup and formulate a more aggressive strategy. Her suspicions proved correct when a new, heavier packet arrived, this time via courier, demanding a signature. It wasn't just a letter. It was a formal notice of intent to levy significant fines, coupled with a threat to initiate legal proceedings for breach of community covenants and harassment if Max was not removed from the premises within 72 hours. Mrs. Davis's signature was scrawled at the bottom, bold and uncompromising, alongside a freshly printed HOA legal counsel's letterhead. A local firm Elara immediately recognized as notoriously aggressive, though not particularly adept, at complex federal disability law. Harassment. Max, Elara scoffed, stroking the golden fur behind his ears as he lay by her feet, oblivious to the legal storm brewing around him. They call asserting my rights harassment. This is precisely what happens when power goes unchecked. The new notice was designed to intimidate, to overwhelm with legalese and the sheer weight of its implied authority. It detailed a series of escalating fines, a daily charge for unauthorized animal presence, a fee for unnecessary legal review, and even a potential lien on her property. It was a classic bully tactic, scare the resident into submission, with financial threats. But Elara wasn't just any resident. She was an expert in these very intimidation games, having dismantled them countless times from the other side of the courtroom. The anger she felt was now mixed with a chilling determination. They had just given her more rope to hang themselves. Every new threat, every baseless accusation, only solidified the foundation of her eventual case. The loop was tightening, not around her, but around the increasingly cornered HOA. Her response was swift, surgical, and utterly devoid of emotion. She didn't bother with another explanation. Instead, she crafted a formal cease and desist letter, addressed not just to the HOA board, but specifically to their newly engaged legal counsel. In language so precise it bordered on poetic, she meticulously dissected every false claim and every illegal threat made in their recent notice. She cited case law after case law, referencing federal appellate court decisions that specifically invalidated HOA no pet policies when applied to legitimate service animals under the ADA and FHA. She highlighted their failure to engage in the interactive process as mandated by law, and directly accused them of discrimination under Title III of the ADA and Section 804F3B of the FHA. She even included a detailed calculation of potential damages she could seek, including compensatory damages for emotional distress, punitive damages, and attorney's fees, the latter being a significant detail, though she still carefully avoided stating she was the attorney. The letter concluded with a stern warning: any further attempts to fine, harass, or restrict her and Max's rightful residence would be met with immediate and decisive legal action, including the filing of a federal lawsuit. Elara printed out the letter on her professional-grade stationery, the kind used in serious legal correspondence. She packaged it with copies of the relevant federal statutes, excerpts from key court rulings, and a timeline of all previous communications, highlighting the HOA's consistent pattern of noncompliance. She sent it via certified mail, return receipt requested, and emailed a copy to both Mrs. Davis and the HOA's legal firm, ensuring undeniable proof of delivery. She knew this level of legal precision would send ripples through the HOA. Mrs. Davis, used to dealing with intimidated homeowners, would likely be flustered. The HOA's lawyer, on the other hand, would recognize the caliber of the opposition, even if they didn't yet know who it was. The loop was shifting from a simple back and forth to a full-blown legal chess match, with Elara consistently several moves ahead. Days passed, and the usual HOA chatter on community forums and social media seemed to die down, replaced by a palpable tension. Neighbors, usually eager to gossip, offered Elara cautious, sympathetic glances but no direct engagement, sensing the serious nature of the dispute. Elara knew the HOA board was likely scrambling, their initial bravado replaced by genuine unease. She imagined their lawyer, perhaps a general practitioner not well versed in disability law, advising them that this resident was clearly not backing down and, more importantly, knew her stuff. The fines hadn't materialized on her account, and there were no more threatening letters. The storm was gathering, but the thunder hadn't quite broken. Elara spent her time fine-tuning her legal arguments, preparing hypothetical responses to potential defenses, and compiling an even larger dossier of evidence. She wasn't waiting for them to make another move. She was preparing for the final confrontation, the one where her true identity would finally become their ultimate undoing. The silence was unnerving. Yes, but for Elara, it was the calm before the revelation, the quiet before the full weight of her legal expertise crashed down upon Willow Creek Estates. The HOA's silence had finally broken, not with a whimper, but with a summons. Elara received formal notification of an arbitration hearing to resolve the animal nuisance issue, scheduled for the following Tuesday evening in the community clubhouse's small, sterile meeting room. It was their attempt to maintain control, to keep the matter internal and away from an actual courtroom. Elara, however, saw it for what it was, the perfect stage. She arrived precisely on time, Max walking calmly beside her, his presence a silent, dignified counterpoint to the tense atmosphere. Mrs. Davis sat at the head of the long, polished table, flanked by two other board members, Mr. Henderson and Ms. Chen, all with stern, unyielding expressions. Opposite them sat a nervous-looking man, Mr. Thompson, the HOA's lawyer. He was young, probably recently out of law school, and already seemed overwhelmed, his tie slightly askew. He glanced at Max with a flicker of unease before quickly averting his gaze. "Ms. Vance," Mrs. Davis began, her voice brittle and officious. "Thank you for attending. We are here tonight to resolve the ongoing issue regarding your animal. As you know, our community bylaws clearly prohibit pets." She gestured to Mr. Thompson. "Our council is here to ensure we proceed according to established procedure." Elara nodded calmly, taking her seat, Max settling gracefully at her feet. She looked directly at Mrs. Davis, her gaze unwavering. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis. I appreciate the opportunity for discussion. However, I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding, which I aim to clarify tonight." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Ms. Vance, as the HOA's legal representative, I must advise you that our position is firm. The bylaws are clear. We understand you believe your animal is a service animal, but you haven't provided sufficient documentation to substantiate this claim under our guidelines." He spoke with a practiced, but thin, legal confidence, clearly reading from prepared notes. Elara let him finish, her expression unreadable. Max, sensing her focus, lay perfectly still, his eyes occasionally flicking between Elara and the board members. "Mr. Thompson," Elara began, her voice clear and resonant, completely devoid of the frustration she had felt weeks prior. "Your guidelines, as you call them, are superseded by federal law. Specifically, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Title III, and the Fair Housing Act, Section 800 for F3B, mandate reasonable accommodations for service animals. Furthermore, the Department of Justice explicitly states that HOAs cannot demand documentation of a disability or specific training for a service animal, nor can they inquire about the nature of the disability. The only two questions permissible are: 1. Is the animal required because of a disability? And 2. What work or task has the animal been trained to perform?" She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. The board member shifted uneasily, glancing at Mr. Thompson, whose face had begun to pale. He mumbled, "Well, we believe our bylaws offer sufficient clarity for our community's specific needs." Elara's gaze sharpened, her voice taking on a crisp, authoritative tone that brooked no argument. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson, your specific needs do not override federal statutes. Your previous correspondence, including your notice of intent to fine me and threat of legal action, constitutes a clear pattern of discriminatory housing practices. Your refusal to engage in an interactive process and your demand for documentation that is legally prohibited are not merely misinterpretations. They are violations." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes sweeping over the board members, resting finally on Mrs. Davis, whose composure was visibly cracking. "This isn't an animal nuisance issue, Mrs. Davis. This is a clear case of disability discrimination." Then came the moment. Elara picked up her briefcase, unlatched it, and pulled out a single, embossed business card. She slid it across the table towards Mr. Thompson, whose eyes widened perceptibly as he read the name and title. "My name is Elara Vance," she stated, her voice calm but powerful, "and I am an attorney specializing in disability rights. My firm has successfully litigated numerous cases against entities, including HOAs, that have engaged in discriminatory practices regarding service animals." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Mrs. Davis's jaw dropped, her face going from pale to a shade of mottled red. Mr. Henderson looked like he'd seen a ghost, while Miss Chen clutched her pen, her knuckles white. Mr. Thompson, whose initial bravado had completely evaporated, looked utterly aghast. He stammered, You're an attorney." Elara offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, and I am quite familiar with the relevant statutes, precedents, and the substantial penalties associated with their violation." She then launched into a precise, systematic dismantling of their position, her words hitting like precisely aimed darts. "Your bylaws, as written and applied in this case, are not only discriminatory but, in fact, unenforceable where they conflict with federal law. Your threat of fines constitutes a legal retaliation. Your failure to provide a reasonable accommodation form is a direct violation of HUD guidelines. I have documented every single communication, every single refusal, every instance of your noncompliance. I have a detailed timeline, copies of all correspondence, and a thorough legal analysis outlining your liabilities. She pulled out a thick binder, its pages tabbed and highlighted, and placed it firmly on the table. I've also prepared a draft complaint, ready for filing in federal court, alleging violations of the ADA, FHA, and relevant state disability laws, seeking not only injunctive relief from Max's rightful residency, but also compensatory and punitive damages for the emotional distress and legal fees incurred. Given my profession, rest assured, those fees will be substantial. The air in the room was thick with tension, palpable fear replacing the earlier arrogance. The HOA members, their faces ashen, now looked to their young lawyer, who simply stared at Elara, utterly defeated. The power had irrevocably shifted. Elara had unveiled her true strength, turning their dismissive tactics into their greatest undoing. The silence that followed Elara's devastating reveal in the clubhouse was deafening, broken only by the faint whir of the air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of Mr. Thompson's pen against his legal pad. Mrs. Davis, her face a mask of shock and indignation, finally managed to stammer, "An attorney. But, you live here, you never said anything." Elara's gaze was unwavering. "My residency here, Mrs. Davis, does not negate my professional standing, nor does it excuse your blatant disregard for federal law. My initial communications were clear and polite. Your responses were not." Mr. Thompson, the HOA's lawyer, finally found his voice, albeit a shaky one. "Mrs. Davis, perhaps we should take a brief recess to discuss our options privately." His eyes, wide with a newfound respect bordering on fear, darted to the thick binder Elara had placed on the table, its tab screaming Exhibit A, Exhibit B, legal precedent, and damages calculation. The board members, looking utterly bewildered and defeated, quickly agreed, practically fleeing the room. Elara and Max remained seated, the golden retriever's calm presence a stark contrast to the panicked whispers now emanating from the small, glassed-off office where the HOA huddled. Elara knew exactly what was happening. Mr. Thompson was explaining, in no uncertain terms, the catastrophic legal exposure they faced. He'd be detailing the potential federal lawsuit, the substantial legal fees hers, which would be covered by them, the compensatory damages for emotional distress, and the very real possibility of punitive damages designed to punish their discriminatory behavior. He'd be telling them that their position was untenable, their bylaws indefensible against federal statutes, and their past actions a gold mine for her case. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the bitter taste of legal reality. 20 minutes later, the HOA board and their counsel reemerged, their faces grim. Mrs. Davis, her usual steely resolve completely crumbled, avoided eye contact with Elara. It was Mr. Thompson who spoke, his voice subdued, devoid of all previous bluster. "Ms. Vance," he began, the board has reviewed the information you presented. We acknowledge a serious misunderstanding of relevant federal laws. On behalf of the Willow Creek Estates HOA, we sincerely apologize for the distress and inconvenience this has caused you and your service animal, Max. Elara watched him, unblinking. An apology was a start, but it wasn't enough. "Apologies are noted, Mr. Thompson," she replied calmly, "but apologies do not rectify a pattern of discrimination or secure the rights of others who may follow." She then laid out her terms, not as demands, but as non-negotiable requirements, for a full and final resolution, thus avoiding a federal lawsuit. Firstly, she articulated, her voice unwavering, the notice of violation and all associated threats of fines must be immediately and permanently rescinded. Max's residency, as a service animal, must be formally acknowledged and protected under a new, compliant policy. Secondly, the HOA will formally adopt new, legally compliant policies regarding service animals and reasonable accommodations for residents with disabilities. These policies will explicitly state their adherence to the ADA and FHA and will be prominently displayed and communicated to all residents. I will personally review and approve the language of these new policies. She saw Mrs. Davis flinch at that last part. Thirdly, a formal, written apology, acknowledging the HOA's specific legal errors and commitment to compliance, must be issued to me and publicly posted within the community, perhaps on the community website and notice board, for a period of no less than 90 days. This is crucial for educating other residents and ensuring transparency. She paused, letting them absorb the weight of these demands. Finally, the HOA will implement mandatory training for all current and future board members and management staff on federal disability laws, reasonable accommodations, and the proper handling of service animal requests. I can even recommend an excellent legal firm specializing in such training, for which the HOA will bear all costs. The board members looked at each other, then back at Mr. Thompson, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod, signaling that these terms, while humiliating, were infinitely better than facing Elara Vance in federal court. Mrs. Davis, defeated, managed a strained agreed. The very next day, the notice of violation was rescinded. Within a week, a formal, detailed apology was emailed to every resident and pinned to the community notice board, explicitly mentioning Elara Vance and Max, and admitting the HOA's legal missteps. The new, comprehensive service animal policy, meticulously reviewed and approved by Elara herself, was swiftly adopted, becoming a model for other HOAs in the region. Mandatory training sessions, led by a firm Elara had indeed recommended, commenced for all board members, transforming their previous ignorance into a grudging, but necessary, understanding of disability rights. The long-term impact on the Willow Creek Estates community was profound. The initial tension faded, replaced by an undeniable shift in awareness. Residents learned what a service animal truly was, fostering a more inclusive environment. Other residents with disabilities, previously hesitant to advocate for their needs, found a renewed confidence, knowing the HOA could no longer claim ignorance. Elara, no longer just the new resident with the beautiful dog, became a quiet champion within the community, though she never sought the spotlight. Her victory wasn't just personal, it was a precedent-setting battle won for everyone, a testament to the power of knowledge and unwavering resolve. Max continued his peaceful life, a symbol of the rights fought for and won, walking proudly beside Elara through the now truly tranquil paths of Willow Creek Estates. Their story became a whispered legend, a reminder that true justice often comes from unexpected places, delivered by those who, though silently powerful, are often underestimated until it's too late. It was a triumph of justice, ensuring that no one else in their community, or perhaps beyond, would suffer the same discriminatory fate, proving that sometimes the quietest battles leave the loudest, most impactful echoes.